January 12, 1942. Willow Run Township, Michigan. Snow lashes sideways across a desolate stretch of frozen farmland. A bitter wind whistles against the corrugated steel walls of a half-finished factory. An immense, skeletal structure stretching so far across the horizon, it seems to vanish into the storm. Inside, floodlights flicker against a cavernous interior, still echoing with construction noise. Workers in heavy coats hammer beams into place. Sparks cascade from welders on suspended platforms. And standing alone on the raw concrete floor, hands buried in his coat pockets, is a man known across Detroit simply as Cast Iron Charlie. Charles E. Sorensen, Ford Motor Company's fiery, barrel-chested production chief, narrows his eyes at the icy air swirling around him. His breath hangs like smoke. The heaviest war in human history is unfolding half a world away. But standing here, surrounded by chaos, Sorensen feels something else, something far more personal. He feels the weight of impossibility. Because the U.S. government has just handed Ford an order no one in aviation history has ever taken seriously. Build a bomber every hour. And not just any bomber, the B-24 Liberator, a 4-engine all-metal long-range giant with over 1,225,000 individual parts. A machine so complex, it normally takes the nation's finest aircraft craftsmen 1 month to assemble. The very idea of mass-producing a bomber like an automobile is considered absurd. Even Henry Ford's closest aviation advisors called the notion insane. But Sorensen isn't a man who listens to skeptics. He glances upward at the steel rafters, imagining them alive, humming, moving. A factory big enough to swallow a battleship. A line long enough to build machines that will fight across 2 oceans. Aircraft rolling forward not in weeks, but minutes. To others, that sounds like madness. To Sorensen, it sounds like destiny. Moment of the crisis no one talks about. Just weeks earlier, Pearl Harbor had changed everything. Radio dispatches crackled across America with sickening updates. The Pacific Fleet ablaze, Army Air Forces desperate for long-range bombers, British squadrons begging for replacement aircraft. Bomber Command's survival depended on machines like the B-24. But Consolidated Aircraft, the company that designed the bomber, was drowning. Their factories in San Diego and Fort Worth couldn't keep up. Even at maximum effort, the nation was only producing 1 B-24 every few days. At this rate, the U.S. would never gain the air power it needed. The War Department's conclusion was brutal. If America cannot build B-24s faster, America cannot win. So they came to Ford Motor Company with a desperate question. Can you do for airplanes what you did for the Model T? But at the moment Sorensen realized the truth. Inside the icy shell of Willow Run, Sorensen kneels beside a pencil sketch he's drawn on a sheet of scrap plywood. It's crude, rushed, but visionary. A single, continuous moving assembly line, longer than any industrial process ever attempted, running straight through the beating heart of Willow Run. Components feeding in from sub-assembly departments arranged like arteries around a mechanical spine. Wings built on one line, engines on another. Tail sections, turrets, landing gear, all converging toward the main line like rivers into a sea. And at the end, a complete B-24 rolling out the doors under its own power, not in a month, not in a week, but every 63 minutes. He slides his gloved hand over the drawing. Every engineer who has seen this plan has given the same response. Impossible. Aircraft mechanics insist that airplanes are handmade creations, fitted, adjusted, customized, refined. Built by master craftsmen, not mass-produced by machines. A bomber, they say, cannot simply move. But Sorensen thinks differently. Ford revolutionized automobiles by making them move through jigs, stations, and incremental steps that transform chaos into order. Why should bombers be any different? His voice echoes in the empty space. Everything that moves gets built. Everything that stands still becomes a bottleneck. He doesn't know it yet, but that single idea will reshape the war. As a giant awakens outside, trucks grind through the snow, hauling in steel beams, paint drums, and piles of machinery. Workers string electrical lines the length of 6 football fields. The smell of wet lumber and diesel hangs heavy. Willow Run is already becoming something unnatural. A factory so large that workers will later joke they need bicycles just to cross it. But Sorensen needs more than size. He needs a miracle of coordination. He calls over a foreman. Find every toolmaker you can, every one of them. We're building jigs, fixtures, cradles, rigs, enough to make every step idiot-proof. The foreman hesitates. For cars? Sorensen scowls. For bombers. Within hours, teams begin forging the mechanical skeleton of the line. Moving slings for fuselage sections, rotating mounts for wing assemblies, special lifts to maneuver engines into position with the precision of surgeons. Every expert in the aircraft industry insists this is folly. But Charlie Sorensen is not building airplanes. He is building a system, a living machine that will force airplanes to build themselves. The human face in a sea of steel. Mid-afternoon, the doors slam open and the icy wind rips through the factory. A young apprentice named Joe Martinez, barely 20, stomps snow from his boots as he enters. His father worked at Ford's River Rouge plant. His uncles too. But none of them ever imagined seeing something like this. Mr. Sorensen, Joe calls. Sorensen looks up. You're one of the new welders? Yes, sir. They told me to work wherever you point. Sorensen smiles faintly, his first smile of the day. Good, because before we're done, this place won't just be building planes. Joe frowns. What then? Sorensen turns back to his drawing. It'll be building victory. And in that moment, among the chaos, cold, and doubt, Joe feels something shift inside him. Something he will remember decades later when old veterans speak of the B-24 assembly line as if it were myth. Because he was there before the miracle started. There, when one engineer dared to propose the impossible. And there, when America's greatest industrial gamble began. February 10th, 1942. Willow Run, Michigan. 2:14 a.m. The storm has passed. A pale winter moon hangs over the nearly completed factory, now humming with a strange, nocturnal energy. Dozens of construction lamps glow like floating suns suspended from steel rafters. Their harsh white light paints long, trembling shadows across the polished concrete floor. Most factories sleep at this hour. Willow Run does not sleep. Inside, the echo of footsteps, the metallic rasp of wrenches, and the rhythmic thump of pneumatic riveters blend into an industrial heartbeat. Everywhere, men move with a sense of urgency that didn't exist before Pearl Harbor. Every strike of a hammer feels personal. Every weld glows like a spark of vengeance. Sorensen stands in the center of this controlled chaos, sleeves rolled back, tie loosened, his face illuminated by the cold light of a drafting projector. For weeks he has fought engineers, bureaucracy, and even the laws of physics to make the impossible real. Tonight, the gamble is ready to be tested. Out of the line that terrified the experts, aircraft supervisors from San Diego arrive earlier in the evening to observe. though Sorensen heard the muttered rumors. We're here to watch the disaster. They expected rows of workbenches, hand-built assemblies, aircraft fuselages scattered like unfinished puzzles. But what they find instead is a structure unlike anything in aviation history. A single continuous main line, straight as an arrow, running the length of nearly a mile. On one end of it sits Jig 1, a massive steel cradle where the first fuselage segments will be mounted. 40 feet down the line is Station 2, where longerons will be fixed. Then Station 3, where hydraulics are inserted. Then Station 4, Station 5, and onward, each precisely timed. Each designed so that no part of the bomber can slow the march forward. Massive chain-driven tracks run beneath the floor. A silent conveyor, the mechanical spine of the bomber-making beast. One of the consolidated supervisors finally blurts out, "This thing's bigger than your Rouge engine line." Sorensen doesn't look up from his clipboard. It has to be. Another supervisor whispers under his breath, "You can't move an airplane like a Model T." Sorensen hears it anyway. "That's funny," he says evenly, "because few minutes from now, gentlemen, we're going to move one." There are a moment suspended in steel down the line. A team of riggers positions the first fuselage shell. Bare metal gleaming under the industrial lights. No engines, no wings, no control surfaces. Just the seed of a bomber. Young Joe Martinez, now assigned as a welding assistant, stands next to it. He wipes his palms on his coveralls. His heart is hammering. "Joe," a foreman calls, "tighten those guide clamps. Make sure she doesn't drift when the chain takes up tension." Joe nods and steps onto the platform. His breath escapes in faint white clouds, despite the heaters roaring nearby. For a moment, time seems to hold. This is the moment Sorensen has been carrying in his mind since December. The moment investors called ridiculous. The moment even Henry Ford himself wasn't sure could work. Yet here it is. Alive, warm, ready. "Well, start the line." Sorensen raises a single hand, signaling the electrical crew. They stand by a control panel wired directly into the conveyor's primitive but powerful motor array. "Mr. Bertoldi Hadmader Sorensen," one of the consolidated supervisors says nervously. "If it slips, the fuselage might shear." Sorensen cuts him off. "If it slips, we fix it. If it works, gentlemen, you're looking at the future of war production." Silence. Then Sorensen gives the order. "Start the line." A deep mechanical hum rolls beneath the concrete. The chains shudder. The track vibrates gently. Joe grips the fuselage brace. With a groaning whisper, the aircraft begins to roll forward. Slowly, smoothly, like a massive steel animal awakening from sleep. The supervisors stare, speechless. One mutters, "Good Lord, it's moving." Like a new machine is born. The fuselage glides down the line toward Station 2. Workers fall into position with the precision of a drill team. Riveters lock into place. Welders swing their booms overhead. Teams on rolling platforms glide alongside, performing tasks in motion. Sorensen watches every inch of it, eyes narrow, hands clasped behind him. This is not just a conveyor. This is a choreography, a mechanical ballet performed by thousands of hands. Every 10 feet, the bomber looks a little less skeletal, a little more alive. Wiring harnesses appear, panels snap into place, frame braces tighten. By Station 6, the supervisors from Consolidated look stunned. One finally manages to speak. "You're going to build more bombers in a month than we can build in a year." Sorensen doesn't respond. because he's not thinking about numbers. He's thinking about the men who will fly these machines. The boys in muddy boots, the crews freezing their fingers on control yokes over the Pacific. The pilots who will carry these bombers into the jaws of Europe. He is thinking about them every time the line moves 1 inch. During the first crisis, 10 minutes into the test run, a problem erupts. A team at Station 7 is late tightening a tail bulkhead. The fuselage arrives while they're still preparing clamps. "We're behind," someone shouts. The bomber keeps advancing. It cannot stop. The line does not wait. A worker slips. A wrench clatters to the floor. Joe Martinez sees panic ripple through the station. If the fuselage drifts past the rigging platform before the bulkhead is tightened, the entire operation could choke. Prove the critics right. Joe doesn't think. He jumps onto the moving platform, grabs the loose support bracket, and locks it into place with a lightning-fast weld. Sparks erupt around him. The fuselage clears the station with seconds to spare. The foreman shouts, "Nice save, kid." But the important thing is this. The line did not stop. Not tonight. Not ever again, if Sorensen has his way. And when the bomber reaches Station 12, Sorensen finally exhales. Willow Run is no longer an idea. It is a machine, a weapon, a promise. And it is only just beginning to move. March 4th, 1942. Willow Run, Michigan. 10:32 a.m. The snow has melted. Spring winds rush across the Michigan fields, carrying the scent of thawing soil and hammer grease. Yet inside Willow Run, the seasons feel irrelevant. The factory is its own ecosystem now, a world of steel, sweat, and thunder that never sleeps. Thousands of workers flood through the gates every morning, forming a river of humanity flowing into the colossal building that newspapers have already begun calling the Arsenal of Democracy. But to Sorensen, this arsenal is still only half alive. The Conveyor prototype worked in February. It moved a fuselage. It built the beginnings of a bomber. But one test is not a revolution. The country is losing aircraft faster than factories can replace them. The Pacific is burning. Europe is under siege. Bomber Command needs Liberators urgently. And Willow Run? It is producing nothing yet. Sorensen knows the clock is ticking. How's the problem? No one wanted to admit, for all its genius, the assembly line is starving. Parts arrive late from suppliers. Wing sections sit unfinished. Landing gear assemblies come in mismatched sets. The B-24's complex Davis wing, long and narrow with a high aspect ratio, requires precision machining that many subcontractors simply cannot deliver. When crates finally do arrive, they're often filled with components that are warped, mismeasured, or incompatible with Ford's jigs. A furious engineer slams one crate shut. "These parts were hand-shaped at the consolidated plant," he says. "They don't fit our fixtures. It's like forcing a puzzle piece into the wrong box." Sorensen massages the bridge of his nose. He expected this. He fought against this. And now he has to fix this. "You don't mass-produce an airplane by waiting around," he growls. "If the parts are wrong, then we build the right ones. Here, in this factory." The engineer blinks. "Sir, that means setting up dozens of sub-assembly shops." Then we set up dozens of sub-assembly shops. And with that, Willow Run becomes something new, a city. Machine shops, hydraulic test rooms, wing assembly lines, engine overhaul centers, panel stamping stations, glass fitting studios, turret assembly workshops. Within weeks, entire industrial neighborhoods blossom under Willow Run's roof. The workers who became soldiers without uniforms. The workforce grows by the day. Farm boys, tool and die veterans, teenage apprentices, women, thousands of them, stepping into roles they never imagined. Among them is Clara Hughes, a 25-year-old former schoolteacher who now mans a rivet gun on the upper wing jig. Her arms ache every night. Her coveralls smell of metal dust, but she refuses to slow down. Each time she drills, she imagines the pilot who will someday rely on the wing she is helping build. One evening before shift change, she finds Sorensen checking torque charts at her station. "Sir," she says hesitantly, "they told us these planes have to fly all the way to Germany." Sorensen nods. "So, if I miss a rivet, then a crew might not come home." She swallows hard, then squares her shoulders. "Then I guess I'll miss none." Sorensen gives a rare approving nod. "See that you don't." Clara squeezes the trigger on her rivet gun. The metallic chatter echoes through the hall like machine gun fire. She isn't fighting on a battlefield, but she feels something similar. A determination, a quiet resolve. She is building ammunition for liberty. They do the first fully moving line test by late April. Sorensen orders the second great trial. Move a half-built bomber the entire length of the line. Not a bare fuselage, not a simple shell. A partially assembled, fully rigged B-24 body weighing thousands of pounds. The decision spreads through the factory like electricity. Joe Martinez is now on the electrical harness team. Clara is finishing a wing segment. Engineers scramble to verify alignment, measure clearances, calibrate torque settings. Supervisors bark instructions over the factory din. At 5 p.m., the conveyor hums to life. Workers climb onto mobile platforms, cables are tightened, tools clatter into waiting hands. Then, slowly, the bomber begins to move. 50 feet, 100, 200. The line carries it through welding bays, past tool stations, under a canopy of swinging cranes. Everything clicks, shifts, connects, flows. A reporter from the Detroit Free Press visiting the factory watches with astonishment. "This isn't an assembly line," he murmurs. "It's choreography." Sorensen overhears. That's the idea. But halfway down Station 18, a vibration begins. Barely noticeable at first, then growing. An engine mount fixture is misaligned. The bomber wobbles. Workers freeze. If the mount buckles, the fuselage could twist. A single failure could paralyze the entire mile-long line, confirming every critic's prophecy. Toolmen race forward. A rigger grabs a stabilizing brace. Joe and Clara, working different stations, both feel their hearts hammering, though neither knows the crisis is happening. Sorensen moves before anyone else can. He vaults onto the track, grabs the fixture adjustment crank, and shouts, "Brace it, now!" The rigger locks the brace. The vibration steadies. The mount aligns. The bomber glides forward, unharmed. The line never stops, not once. On a factory that defied logic. By May 1942, Willow Run is producing sub-assemblies faster than any aviation plant in the world. Workers ride bicycles between stations. Cafeterias operate around the clock. Entire day and night, crews cycle without pause. The bomber line is no longer an idea. It is a reality. And the numbers begin to rise. One bomber every day, then one every 12 hours, then one every 8. Still far from Sorensen's dream of 1 per hour, but moving in the right direction. And for the first time, Allied commanders overseas begin to notice something. They're receiving more B-24s. More than expected, more than ever before. Willow Run is not yet the monster it will become, but its shadow is already falling across the war. December 8th, 1942. Willow Run, Michigan. 6:10 a.m. Cold sunlight creeps over the eastern sky, catching the frost on the roof of the world's largest factory. Inside, the roar of Willow Run is already at full strength. thousands of machines pounding in synchronized rhythm, conveyor chains humming like the pulse of a colossal engine, and workers flooding the aisles in a tide of wool coats, metal lunch pails, and determination. The vast interior glows under a forest of suspended lamps. Heat radiates from welding arcs. Steam drifts from hydraulic testers. Everything smells of oil, aluminum shavings, and ambition. This is no longer the experimental chaos of early 1942. This is Willow Run, operating at full wartime stride. And today, Sorensen walks the line with a different expression. Not doubt, not frustration, not defiance. Today, he carries something far rarer: expectation. Because the factory is approaching the threshold no one believed possible. The line has accelerated month after month, from 8 hours to 6 to 3, and now stands on the brink of a number that seems ludicrous even to the men and women achieving it. A bomber every 63 minutes, an airplane more complex than any war machine built before it, turning raw materials into a weapon of global reach, on a schedule tighter than many car factories. The leaders in Washington called it a fantasy. The aircraft industry called it reckless. Consolidated's own engineers called it sorcery. But in the longest factory in America, the hourplane miracle is about to become real. For the day the doors jammed and the line refused to stop, as the factory grew, so did its problems. The building was so massive that the architects designed it with a single mile-long straight line, only to run into an unexpected obstacle. Wayne County refused to allow the factory to cross into their jurisdiction. The bomber line couldn't continue straight. It had to turn. A 90-degree bend, the kink, became one of the strangest features in industrial history. Critics laughed. Journalists doubted. Engineers called it an operational nightmare. But the kink remained, an industrial elbow that every B-24 in the world now had to navigate. And on the morning of December 8th, the kink tests the line. At Station 42, near the bend, a supply cart overturns. Dozens of ball bearings scatter across the floor, glinting like mercury droplets. A fuselage, nearly complete, is approaching. If it slips, if a wheel skids, if a worker stumbles, the line might stop. The miracle might die. But a maintenance worker named Hank Brubaker, a quiet man with grease-stained hands, acts fast. He dives to the floor with a magnetic broom, sweeping the bearings in one desperate motion as the bomber inches toward him. The cart gets cleared. The fuselage enters the turn smoothly. Hank rolls out of its path seconds before the wheels touch the freshly cleaned floor. A supervisor screams over the din. "Hank, you trying to kill yourself?" He grins, just keeping the war on schedule. Sorensen doesn't witness this. He hears about it 2 stations later, and he just nods. Because what happened at the kink proves something. Willow Run no longer depends on one man's vision. It runs on thousands of people's pride. But a city within a building, by now, Willow Run is so enormous, it functions like a self-contained world. The cafeteria serves 4,000 meals per hour: beef stew, black coffee, biscuits. The infirmary handles cuts, burns, and fatigue cases at a rate rivaling a small hospital. The tool rooms issue 30,000 tools per shift. The parts elevator system alone resembles a miniature subway network. There are nursery rooms for working mothers, chalkboards tracking output for each team, a factory newspaper that publishes morale stories and efficiency tips. Men and women who have never left Michigan suddenly find themselves part of something international, something vast, something essential. Clara Hughes has now become a lead riveter. She trains new women every week, many of them farmers' wives, seamstresses, clerks, teaching them how to hold a gun steady, how to inspect a seam, how to feel the metal hum under their gloves. Joe Martinez, no longer the nervous apprentice he once was, moves along the fuselage stations with expert calm, running electrical harnesses with speed that astonishes inspectors. These workers are not anonymous. They are the invisible engine behind the B-24 Liberator. Every one of them fights the war from inside this thunderous steel sanctuary. On Proof of the Impossible, January 1943. The War Production Board audits the output of Willow Run. Executives gather in the administrative gallery overlooking the final assembly doors. They expect progress, perhaps modest, perhaps impressive, but nothing revolutionary. Then the data arrives. Willow Run has produced more bombers in 30 days than any aviation plant has produced in 6 months. One executive laughs, shaking his head. Another swears quietly under his breath. Then they see it. The stopwatch record. 1 hour, 3 minutes. A fully built B-24 rolls out the doors. A mile of machines. Tens of thousands of workers. Hundreds of stations. And a bomber every single hour. Sorensen stands apart from the celebration. He watches the doors open as another gleaming silver Liberator noses into the daylight. Its olive drab paint isn't yet applied. It looks raw, untested, but ready. A foreman walks over. "Mr. Sorensen," he says quietly, "we did it." Sorensen doesn't smile. He simply whispers, "It isn't for us. It's for them." He looks up, east, toward Europe, where young men in leather jackets, oxygen masks, and freezing hands wait for machines just like this. Machines that might save them. Machines that might bring them home. And Willow Run, against all logic, is building them faster than the enemy can shoot them down. July 15th, 1943. Willow Run Final Assembly Apron. 3:20 p.m. Heat shimmers across the concrete as another B-24 Liberator rolls out of the giant hangar doors, sunlight glinting off its aluminum skin. Its 4 Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines rest silent for now. Nacelles gleaming like polished brass. Ground crewmen swarm around the aircraft, checking fuel lines, tapping gauges, inspecting tire pressure. The bomber sits poised like a predatory bird perched on a cliff's edge. Beyond the apron, a line of completed Liberators stretches down the taxiway like an armored procession. More than 50 aircraft, some painted olive drab, some still in bare metal, glint beneath the Michigan sun. Their tails wear crisp serial numbers. Their bomb bays wait empty. Their wings, once just chalk outlines on Clara Hughes's workbench jig, now cast shadows over the airfield. At the head of the formation stands a young pilot, Lieutenant Walter "Red" Hensley, freshly graduated from training, assigned to ferry test flights for Ford. Sweat pearls at his temples as he gazes up at the newest B-24 delivered by the line. It's hard for him to comprehend it. This machine, this 4-engine, high-lift, long-range Titan, was not assembled by craftsmen one piece at a time. It was built by a system, a relentless, mile-long organism he had walked through only once and never forgotten. He turns as Sorensen approaches, shirt sleeves rolled, clipboard tucked under one arm. "You ready, Lieutenant?" Sorensen asks, voice hard as steel but not unkind. Hensley nods. "Yes, sir." Hard to believe she was still on the line this morning. She was still on Station 132 3 hours ago. Sorensen corrects with a hint of satisfaction. Hensley glances back at the bomber, incredulous. "This thing was built faster than I learned to fly one." Sorensen doesn't smile, but his eyes narrow with a quiet pride. "We build so they can fly," he says. "And you boys fly so they can come home." There's the test flight that silenced the last doubters minutes later. The engines roar to life, one after another, propeller blades a blur of polished fury. The ground vibrates beneath the workers' boots. Spectators shield their eyes against the blowing dust as Hensley taxis the bomber forward. The War Department representatives who once mocked Ford's ambitions now stand in neat rows outside the administrative wing, neckties flapping in the prop wash. "Looks good," one mutters. "Sounds tight," another adds. A third adjusts his hat and murmurs, "Hard to believe they're doing one an hour." Sorensen stands slightly apart, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the runway. The B-24 lines up. Engines howl, tires shriek as they fight the sudden surge of power. And then, with a thunderous rush of air, the bomber rises, wheels tucking beneath its belly, wings leveling as it climbs toward the blue. Workers burst into applause. Some cheer, some whistle. Some simply stare upward, exhausted but proud. Sorensen doesn't clap. He watches until the bomber becomes a speck in the July sky, then turns back toward the factory without a word. Willow Run has proven itself again. A flood of wings across two oceans. By late 1943, numbers begin flowing across Washington like surreal accounting. One B-24 every 63 minutes, 24 per day, 700 per month. Nearly 9,000 for the war, more than any aircraft the United States would ever build. These Liberators fly over Ploesti, blasting oil refineries in some of the most brutal raids of the war. They fly the Arctic convoy routes, hunting U-boats in pitch-black seas. They fly the hump into China, carrying supplies over the Himalayas. They fly from Italy, England, North Africa, Burma, every sky touched by conflict. Crewmen begin joking that the B-24 must be growing on trees back home. They aren't wrong. It's growing on a conveyor belt. When pilots walk their pre-flight checks, they run hands over panels that Clara riveted. When radio operators test their wiring, they trust what Joe Martinez strung together months before. When waste gunners load their ammunition, they lean against bulkheads shaped in the line's early experiments. Thousands of lives depend on the hands inside Willow Run. Millions of miles are flown because those hands refuse to stop moving. Of the night Sorensen walked the empty line. February 11th, 1944, 2:50 a.m. The factory sleeps for a rare moment, a maintenance shift between production cycles. The lights are dim. The conveyors idle. The thundering heart of Willow Run rests like a giant catching its breath. For the first time in months, Sorensen walks the full line alone. He starts at Station 1, the bare fuselage cradle. His footsteps echo in the silence. He passes the wing jig where Clara once wiped sweat from her brow. He passes the electrical stations where Joe learned to tame miles of wiring. He passes the engine mounts, the bomb bay cradles, the turret rigging pits. Each station feels like a memory, each fixture like a battle scar. And when he reaches the end of the line, where fresh Liberators roll into the daylight, he stops, placing one hand on the cold metal railing. How many hours did he fight this? How many nights did he sleep on a cot beside the conveyor? How many times did he hear the word impossible? He exhales slowly. It was all worth it. Because the B-24 Liberator did more than fill airfields. It filled a gap that might have broken the Allied war effort. It bought time, precious time, for bombers, for convoys, for aircrews fighting for their lives. Sorensen turns away from the exit doors and begins walking back into the dim, silent cavern. Tomorrow the line will roar again. Tomorrow more men and women will flood these aisles. Tomorrow Willow Run will build more wings for liberty. The legacy of the impossible line. When the war ends, generals debate which weapons turned the tide. Some say the Sherman tank, others say the Higgins boat, others say radar, or the atomic bomb, or the code breakers at Bletchley. But the quiet truth whispered by logistics officers is something different. Mass production saved the Allies. Not a single invention, but the ability to build thousands of them. Relentlessly, predictably, mechanically. The B-24 Liberator became the physical embodiment of that truth. And Willow Run was the forge that made it real. Years later, pilots who survived firestorms over Germany would return to Michigan, walking the quiet foundations of the old factory. They would run fingers along rusting beams and say softly, "This is where our luck was built." Not in the skies, but in a factory, in a mile-long machine, in a miracle of movement. A miracle born from one man's so-called crazy idea. A conveyor belt that changed a war.